Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Team CSP, we welcome you for our Friday lecture. Once again, this is the third lecture in our series. This initiative was taken up by Professor Sangeeta Menon. So each Friday, we come with a new speaker. We will bring to you a refreshing platform to explore and engage with philosophy, psychology, literature, ideas as crisscross disciplines, and much more. So I would now request Meera Kumar Menon, a PhD scholar under the supervision of Sangeeta Menon, Professor Sangeeta Menon, to introduce today's speaker, Priyanka S.
Hello everyone, am I audible, Niharika?
Yes.
Niharika? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're audible.
Hello everyone, so very glad to introduce today's speaker, Priyanka Shekhar. She is a part of our team, CSP at NIAS. Priyanka has pursued her degree in zoology and psychology from MES College, Bangalore. And then she has gone on to do her master's in clinical psychology from Kasturba Medical College, Bangalore. She's currently a research associate with the DST Satyam project in NIAS. The title of her project is A Study of Consciousness Measures and Synchrony Between Brain and Cardiovascular Dynamics in Yoga Experience. To talk about CBT, CBT is a very innovative technique that is used these days. We often come across these in popular psychology as well. Training in CBT is available, training in NLP is available. So most of us have at some point or another wondered what CBT is all about. So let's welcome Priyanka to give this lecture. Please go on, Priyanka.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I hope I'm audible. Am I audible?
Yes.
All right. Today, like the introduction is already happening, we'll be saying about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically for normal beings, because usually we use it only with a clinical population. For the first time I ever came across CBT, I thought, wow, this sounds great. I think we should also use it in our day-to-day life, because most of us these days do carry such distorted thoughts within us, unknowingly or knowingly sometimes. So I thought, why not use this platform and probably share the idea, share the lesson that I've learned through my psychology, through the subject of psychology that I've learned. Niharika, I would want to share the screen. I'm not able to share. Sorry for that delay.
Still not able
to? I still am not able to share.
Just a minute. Priyanka, are you able to do it now?
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry for that.
No. Okay, are you able to see my screen? Cool. So, like I said, cognitive behavioral therapy for normal beings. Normal is under the quotes. Let's see why it is. Before we go on to the real presentation, before we go on to understand what cognitive behavioral therapy is, let me ask you all a simple question. If a random person walks up to you and say, "You've dressed so well and you look so beautiful," what would you feel? How would you react and what would you respond? Well, if any of you had answered embarrassed, well, I was embarrassed too a few days ago. Like before I started practicing CBT, I was embarrassed too when someone comes up to me and say, "You look beautiful, the dress suits you well." And if any of you had answered telling, "I would be pleased and happy to hear someone telling that," well, that's great. I'm sure some of us would have even felt sad and guilty, and few of us angry and annoyed. It's the same situation. It's one small situation where someone walks up to us and say, you look beautiful. But then there are different ways in which people react. Why is that so? That's because we have a particular thought in our mind to which we react. To that thought influences the way we feel, and that's the feeling will lead to some kind of behavior. Let me just take an example and then tell you. When someone says, I'm feeling sad that the person came up to me and said, I look beautiful, probably the person was thinking that the compliment is actually not true. The person knows me well and would have thought that I have a lot of inferiority complex. So just to make me feel good, he came up to me and said, you look good. He didn't probably mean it. What would that do? It would just lead to the person not wearing the dress again. It's a simple thought which influenced his emotion to be sad, which again led to a bigger reaction where he's not going to wear that dress. He or she is not going to wear that dress ever again. The next reaction which I would like to talk is annoyed. I mean, some of us would have got annoyed when someone walks up to us and says, you look pretty, you look like gorgeous. And you're going to be like, what's the motive? Why are you trying to tell me that? Are you trying to flatter me? With such thoughts, we'll be annoyed. And what will we do? We'll try avoiding that person from next time. We'll be like, this person has some interior motive because of which he's coming and telling all this to me. For those of us who had answered happy, well, we are those people who would say that it's great. Probably they like my dressing sense. I like mine too. We'll thank them and we'll go ahead. It wouldn't bother us much. This is like a normal day-to-day life example where this happens to us quite often. When one situation can yield so many different reactions, then I think in a longer run, such reactions will compile to form any kind of low mood or any kind of frustration or annoyance that we carry along with us. Now comes the real question of why did she write normal beings in quote? CBT has been extensively, just a second. Yeah, CBT has been extensively used amongst clinicians for treating their patients and clients with distorted cognition. When someone walks into the clinic telling, I'm feeling low for 6 months, or I'm showing symptoms of being obsessive about a thought, such cases I'm afraid of heights, or I'm afraid of group, which is affecting my job. Such cases, such extreme cases, when they walk into the clinic, we try to give them CBT first. We try to give them cognitive behavioral therapy first. But what we fail to understand is such thoughts did not arise overnight. It is a combination. It's been over a period of time that's been building one day after the other. And now there came a time when it actually has boomed up. It's become so extensive that the person is not able to take it anymore. And that is why he or she has walked into the clinic telling, I'm feeling low throughout. So if we start using it in our day-to-day life, no, then I think we can try to control that piling up of negative thoughts, that the piling up of what ifs and what shoulds. And why is it happening now? Like, why is it important now? That is because after following a lot of newspaper articles and reading a lot of things on social media platform, I understand that we are constantly being told what is good and what is not, what is to be happy and what is not. Only if I go on a destination picnic, it is happy and it's worth going. If I go back to my village just so that I can be with my grandparents, no, that's not fun anymore. That's not happy anymore. So this constant nagging of what is right and what is not right has been told to us every now and then. There's a pressure built within which tells us what is good and what is not bad. If not for all of us, most of us have this already built-in schemas. We wouldn't tell that the wedding has been planned in my native. Instead, we use this nice term where we say that it's a destination wedding. So we have succumbed to it. We are made to succumb, and we have also succumbed to it. So though we are not yet labeled, or we have not walked into any clinic as of now telling that I'm feeling low persistently, we are some way struggling with it. Out of experience, like out of 3 years of clinical experience, I also understand that among 10 people, it's a rough calculation, among 10 people whom I come across, at least 8 of them complain to me that I persistently have low mood and I think it's normal for me. So it's come to the place where being low is actually become normal. Are we normal beings is the next question, next major important question. Are we really normal beings just because we are not labeled yet? Are we really normal beings? Let's think, answer a few questions, and then probably respond to it later. Are we the ones who are upset, sad, frustrated, hopeless, anxious, and carry burden of complexes and inadequacy? Do we say such sentences to ourselves at least once a while that I'm treated bad, this is not how it should work? What if my mind goes blank when I deliver the lecture? That's my thought, okay? What if my mind goes blank when I deliver the lecture was the thought that actually struck me just before I started the lecture. I will never be happy. He's always late. I'll be alone forever. Such thoughts keep striking us. Are we also the ones who tend to procrastinate, find excuses, dodge responsibility, not take up the work until the last moment? Are we the ones? Well, if you've answered yes to all the questions in the previous slide, then CBT is for us. If not, then if you know someone with a similar pattern, CBT is for us. If no, that's absolutely fine. Still CBT is for us because it's a way of living. It's a structured way of living. It's a structured way of thinking and probably living a life. After telling all of this, I also would try to confirm this to you all. The feeling is undoubtedly it's about external event. It's about past traumas. Let's take an example. I walk to my office. On my way, I slip down the staircase. The next time I walk, I'll be very particular about walking through that particular staircase. I might tend to take a different route, or if I'm walking through the same route, I shall be very careful. Though it's the past trauma of falling down at that place, makes me doubt, but it's also my internal reaction towards that place. So what I'm trying to say is, when I say I just can't help the way I feel, I'm feeling low and I can't do anything about feeling low, then probably we are playing the victim card. We are just beating ourselves down when in actual we can change the way we feel by changing the thought. Now, what's cognitive behavioral therapy? She's told us normal being, she's spoken about examples, all that is fine, but what is cognitive behavioral therapy? Cognitive behavioral therapy has sophisticated definitions given by Aaron T. Beck, who is the founder of CBT. But then, since I'm talking to a larger crowd who also come from a non-expert background, we'll try to define it in a very simple way. CBT says that the problem that we face, the problems are the emotional problems or the behavioral problems that we face are the consequences of a particular way of thinking and behaving. The C stands for the cognition, thoughts, self-talk, or core beliefs, which is not always true. For example, when I attend an interview and I say I lost the interview, I mean, I didn't get the job, I might walk out and say, I'm a failure. I can't even get this done. I couldn't even, clear this small interview. I'm a total failure. So that's a self-talk that we do to ourselves. That's a self-talk that we ask and tell ourselves. And what would be the behavior of it? The behavior would simply be this, that the next time I go to the interview, I'll be more anxious, I'll be more frustrated, I'll be more confused as to whether I might get into this interview or not. Do you see that the small self-talk that I did the last time has influenced so much in me that the behavior the next time I attend an interview will change? In a nutshell, this is what CBT is all about. Your thoughts create your feelings, the feelings create the behavior, and the behavior reinforces your thought again. Let's go back to the same example and try applying it here. The interview and the ones who have failed in the interview. This time, because I failed in the interview, I feel too low. I feel angry because I'm blaming the panel for not selecting me, or I'm blaming the auto driver who didn't drop me at the time, who didn't drop me on time. So the feelings are angry, frustration, and all of that, because of which I reach the interview a little later. I'm shivering, and when they ask me questions, I'm not able to focus on the answers. I'm not able to give them the right answer. I'm too preoccupied with uncertainty of whether I might get the job or not. And now that behavior will reinforce the feeling that I will not get the job. let's say I didn't get the job because I didn't perform well. But who would we blame? We would blame all the external event, the auto driver not reaching on time, the interview panel asking difficult questions, or the interview panel not giving us enough time to answer the questions. What we fail to understand is that the thought that we created and carried along with us stopped us from performing really well. There are basic tenets of CBT. There are about 10 tenets of CBT which we usually read and before practicing CBT. But I don't think that that is something that we need to focus on for today. For today, all we need to know is understand CBT and how to apply it in our day-to-day life. So far, I'm sure you would have understood, or you would have heard me repeatedly telling that there is distorted thoughts, there is a distorted cognition which will influence the way you behave, again, which will influence the way you feel. It's a vicious cycle, right? That's a vicious cycle. But there are basic tenets of CBT which we need to understand for us to work on it, or for us to solve the negative thinking. The way you feel results extremely from the way you think about it. That's what I mean when I say the thoughts create a mood. The message you give yourself have an enormous impact on your emotion. And what's more important is to learn to change your thought. You can change the way you feel. Once you change your thought, you can change the way you feel. For example, when I didn't clear the interview, I could probably have told myself that yes, this time it didn't happen. Okay, probably I didn't prepare well, but this is not the end. My goal is to get a job, not to get a job here. So I will prepare well. The next time, let me see if I could find a job by doing the interview even more better. By this, we are not trying to beat ourselves. We are not trying to blame ourselves. We are only soothing the effect and trying to soothe the mood so that the next time the similar situation happens, the behavior might not repeat. And this is also a fact. Most of the time, negative thoughts are not realistic. You would have heard your friends telling that I'm loser, I don't look beautiful, I'm not fit for this job. Such sentences are like now a very common sentence, like a day-to-day sentence. So few of us even repeat that I'm always sad, I will never be happy. These are all distorted thinking. These are all distorted cognition. Why is it distorted? When you put them in the under the limelight of reality, I'm sure most of them would go wrong. And Dr. Burns has taken the pain of giving us about 10 distorted ways of thinking, which will help us, because once you have the scale in your hand to identify what are the thinking distortions that we have, we can easily correct them. So in the coming slides, we will also see what are those 10 distorted thinkings. Most of the time, negative thought is distorted and realistic. But what the good news is that we can train ourselves to change the thought. By changing the thought, we'll also change the way we feel and behave. Thoughts and emotions are something that each one of us have. It is not who we are. It's quite important to know. I feel sad, but I am not a sad person. I might have lost the interview this time. That does not mean I'm a failure. The emotion is just what I have for that particular moment, depending on what actually happened at that minute. It's not who I am. Like I said, the 10 distorted thinking patterns, once we have the scale in our hand, we can all evaluate ourselves. Probably once I mention all the 10, I finish mentioning all the 10, you can pick up one sentence that you repeat to yourself every day and then see in which category do they fall. The first one is all or none thinking, or polarized thinking. Either I'm good or I'm bad. There is no shades of gray. Either I'm black or I'm white. There's nothing in between. If I've done the interview well, then I'm really good at cracking interviews. I'm really a good person. My subject knowledge is great. But if I've not cracked, then I'm waste. There is no importance to my knowledge. There is nothing that I can do about not being able to crack. Second is overgeneralization. Just one incident can overgeneralize for every other situations. This, I can give you an example. There was this one particular case study which I read. This advocate, he is quite famous, and he's been practicing for about 10 years and has not lost even one case. But then every day he has to step into the court. He always steps in with the fear that I might fail this case. And someday it really did happen that he did fail one particular case. He overgeneralized that failure of one case to all the other cases that he was about to see in the future. He said, I'm going to be a failure. He even stopped seeing any of his clients telling that, I think you need to go back to a better advocate because I might lose this case since I lost the previous case. That's an overgeneralization. Mental filter is something I think most of us do have. One time, one small mistake, we try to apply to everywhere else. If our friend came late only one time out of 10 times, we would go on saying that he's always late. It is not, we wouldn't say he's mostly late, we would say he's always late. Always late meaning that that person has no value for the time that he's come early. Jumping to conclusion and mind reading. This again is quite common again. When I'm giving a lecture or when we are attending a lecture, when someone didn't make an eye contact with us, or they made an eye contact and swiftly shifted from one person to the other person, we come to a conclusion telling that person hates me. Why does she hate me so much that she had to shift her eye contact with me? Fortune telling. This is more like they've got it from our previous generation. So if I wear this particular color of dress, then the job that I go for wouldn't succeed. Or if I didn't find a decent job, then I will never be happy. One girl said no to me, so I will always be alone. Or one guy said no to the marriage proposal, so I'll always be alone. What will happen in the future, I tend to jump to conclusion right now based on the situation that happened just now. Taking decision in the spur of the moment is probably fortune telling as well. Magnification and minimization. A small thing would have happened, a small cut on the finger. The person would magnify the incident to be huge such that the finger itself is gone. It's a small example. I'm trying to give an exaggerated example so that you understand the magnification of thought that can happen. This is again the successful lawyer who believes he is not a great advocate just because he lost one case. Minimization is trying to see all the problems in a very smaller lens. Okay, I've lost a job, so what? Okay, I've got a divorce, so what? I'm not trying to say that this is also wrong, that is also wrong. Any extremities is always a difficulty in a longer run. Emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is that gut instinct which we keep telling. I feel it. I feel today is going to be a bad day. I feel I'm going to break my leg today. Or I feel that today it's going to, I'm going to meet with an accident. Such feelings which does not have a clear-cut underpinning or clear-cut evidence cannot be true always. It can be true in few of our cases, but it cannot be true always. But such people will always say, I feel it, so it must be true. Should statements. I should qualify entrance exam. You all should like my lecture. Or everyone should adore me. I should be the point of attraction. Or I should know everything. Why didn't I know the answer? Why didn't I know the answer which he answered? Such should statements is a little risky. Labeling and mislabeling. I'm sure this is something again we all use. I'm a fool. I'm a stupid. I didn't know this answer. I'm such a loser. I couldn't clear this interview. It was such a simple trick and I didn't understand. I'm so dumb. Such sentences again are like quite common. Personalization. Personalization is any incident we try to put ourselves in that place and try to see ourselves in a bad light. For example, a mother who spilled the milk says she's a bad mother just because she spilled the milk. There was no connection between spilling the milk and being a bad mother, but we tend to personalize in every situation. We try to put ourselves there and show us in a bad light. And these 10 are the, okay. I'm sorry, there was a small glitch here. These 10 are the cognitive distortions that I've been talking about. Then I'm sure by the time we finish this, you would have come up with one particular sentence in your mind, which you've been thinking or which you've been telling yourself on day-to-day basis. If you could put yourselves in one of these statements, well, it's very good. We can together work and resolve it in this session itself. And since the slides will be shared along with you all, I think in future, whenever you come across any kind of these should statements or labelings or mislabelings, you can go back to these slides and see, or probably read more books and then try to resolve it. If you have one sentence particularly in your mind right now, that will do good to us, because we can try solving it and know how to solve it as well. The first thing for any problem is self-awareness. We need to be self-aware about our thoughts. We need to learn our thoughts. External events creates the thought, no doubt. But the reaction to the external event also do create thoughts. That is what I was trying to tell all this while. So when you learn your thoughts, you also understand the kind of reactions you give and the thoughts that lead you to those kinds of moods. Specific kind of negative thoughts causes specific kind of negative emotion. For example, when I'm sad or depressed, that could probably because I'm thinking that I've lost, or there was something quite important for me and I've lost in that. Interview was very important for me. It was a question about my self-esteem. It was a question about how well I could prepare for it or how good of a psychologist I am. But when I lost the interview, I'm sad and depressed because it questioned my self-esteem. I could also be frustrated because I was waiting to clear the interview. I was waiting to get into the job, but then I lost it. So I'm frustrated because there is an unfulfilled expectation there. I can be also in anxiety and pain because it has done a damage to my self-esteem, and I have a feeling that it is unfair for them to not have given a job to me. You can understand that when I know the thoughts, I know the emotion. When I know the emotion, I'm very well aware about the vicious cycle that I'm getting into. So self-awareness is always the first step towards us breaking that cycle. Second is identify the upsetting event. Not always are we going to know that I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm frustrated. No, not all of us know all the emotions. It's quite common that, when someone comes to you and they are telling, see, these are all the things that happened, and you're like, how do you feel about it? They're like, I don't know. That's true. They will not know how they are feeling. So it is suggestible for you to write down the event. Be specific. I went to the interview. They asked me all these questions. I was able to answer 4 questions. I was not able to answer 2 questions. And I was shivering all the while. So be specific. Write every single incident. And then go on to record your emotion. Because I was nervous, I was shivering. Because I was frustrated, I was not able to answer. I was anxious, so I was stuttering and stammering. And rate it in the scale of 10. How severe was your stuttering and stammering? How severe were you shivering? So record it and rate it. And then examine the evidence. I'll tell you what examining the evidence. These are all the techniques. So once you're aware of the cycle, you write down them. Writing down is very important because when you think, there are a number of times where you forget it. There is no record of you having been felt the same way in the previous event. So always record whatever you think and rate it, so that when once the emotion is over, when you reevaluate it, you know that you've come to a better place. It is like a scale for you to measure whether I have improved or I have not improved. The techniques that you can use to improve your mood is to examine the evidence, triple column technique, the double standard method. Before I go on to explain what is examine the evidence and triple column technique, I'll tell you what double standard method is. A friend of yours come to you and they say that I'm feeling too upset because I didn't clear my entrance exam for NEET entrance exam for medical. You wouldn't be going and telling them that you're such a loser, you aren't fit for it, you wouldn't do this because you're not capable of it. I'm sure none of us are going to do it. Instead, what would we say? We would say, it's okay, probably the paper was tough this time. You can always prepare well and reappear again. Next year is always there. You're capable of it. This time probably you got anxious. Let's look into it and let's rework it. And that's double standard. When it comes to our friends or someone else, we tend to be more soft and smooth. But when it comes to our own self, we are going to be very harsh and too forcing upon ourselves. Try to use the double standard method on yourself. Try to see yourself as a friend who's having a problem, who's struggling with a problem. Try to resolve it like a friend of yours. That's double standard method. The next is examining the evidence, where you take one particular thought. Here it says no one likes me. Let me take I'm a failure as a core belief. I'm a failure as the thought that I always carry along with me. I will try to find out what are the supporting evidences for I'm a failure. How many interviews I've lost, how many college admissions I've failed, or how many exams have I failed to pass. And I will also try to find informations that does not support my core belief. That is, on contrary, out of 5 exams, I passed on in all the 4 papers. That one paper, most of them had actually failed. 4 interviews that we attended, 3 interviews I cleared, only 1 interview I failed. So you're trying to collect evidences supporting and not supporting your core belief. By doing so, you're trying to tell yourself that the thought distortion that you have is probably very unrealistic, is not true. It's only your reaction to the spur of the moment. The next is the triple column technique. This is something I follow even today. Like, I have a diary and I maintain this. All of us have these automatic thoughts. The first example here is again from a real life experience from one of my friend. Recently, this person came up to me and said, I haven't cleared my entrance exam. He jumped to conclusion telling, I'm a failure, I let you all down, I will never be a graduate and I should quit. From the distortion that we have seen in the previous slides, those 10 distortions, this person clearly showing all or none thinking. When I pass, only then I'm a successful person. Only when I pass, I'm knowledgeable. There is no in between. There is no shades of gray for this person. And overgeneralization. If I've failed in this entrance exam, that means I've failed in all the entrance exams. Fortune telling that I will be a loser. There is no way I'm going to, pass in any other entrance exams. Labeling, again, I'm a failure is a labeling. I'm trying to tell myself and label myself. Instead of telling this to himself, if he had rationally written a response telling, well, I have not cleared my entrance exam, I can work on it. I will apply to other universities and evaluate my opportunities. I wanted to get through this, but couldn't. It is okay. My goal is to be a graduate. Do you see the change in emotional reaction that you yourself have when you read the automatic thought and rational response? That's what CBT is all about. It says that the thought you keep telling yourself will create some kind of mood. And to alter that mood, you're going to have a rational response for every irrational or distorted cognitions that you carry along with you. There's another one, second example, which I've left incomplete for you all to complete. Probably you all can come up with some rational response for it. At the end of the session, we can read 1 or 2 of it. So the automatic thought that this person used to carry was this: she doesn't like me. She has a remark for everything I do. I know she hates me. I'm not a good student. So this is an automatic thought by another friend of mine. The entire purpose is to lure ourselves into doing the work, achieving our goal with chocolate rather than a stick, telling myself that I'm a failure, I should work more harder, I should work more harder. No, that's not how it's going to happen. I'm going to lure myself into it. I'm going to tell, I'll give you a chocolate when you finish this. This is such an easy thing. You're just going to talk to like 10 people. What's so hard about it? This way we will not damage our self-esteem. We will also improve our self-efficacy. So that's quite important. In the longer run, we are not damaging anything that is self. Now, this is quite interesting. Only real problems can be solved. When I say real problems, it's not the problem from external environment. It's not the problem of losing a job. It's not a problem of losing a loved one. No, the real problem lies within. Whatever happens, even if I've lost a job, what is my reaction? Depending on the reaction, I would call it a problem or not so problem. And how do I find this real problem from within? I have few questions. How long have I been feeling this? Did I do something about it? Are my thoughts realistic? Am I brooding over a situation that's not under my control? Are my expectations even real? Am I feeling hopeless even before trying? Why do we have to ask all these questions? Well, only real problems can be solved. If you've lost the job, definitely we are going to sit and worry about what is in the future. We are going to be anxious about how we are going to bring food to the plate this month. That's all true. Those are all true problems from the environment. But that is out of our control. There is nothing that we can do about controlling those problems. All we can do is find another job. But for a day or two, we will have those bad emotions that we'll be carrying along with us. But for a problem to be real from within, it must occur at some place and at some time of the day. Sometimes you may have this nagging feeling that something isn't quite right, but you can't put a finger on it. and say that this is what is wrong. That's automatic thought. That is the real problem that I'm talking about. The automatic thought that comes to your mind every time you come up with a situation, come across a situation. When Niharika asked me if you could do this presentation, the immediate automatic thought that came into my mind was this: will I be able to do? What if I actually did not do a good? What if I don't do a good job? What if I stammer and stutter like the one I did just like a seconds ago? These were all the automatic thoughts that I came. It was not I deliberately wanted it to come. It's something that I've been carrying from a long time with me, and that immediately came. But most of the times these automatic thoughts are not real. I'm sure so far, like for 30 minutes I've been talking, this is the only time I started because I recalled those automatic thoughts deliberately. When I put them under a light of realistic and unrealistic, I know that stammering and stuttering is not a part of me. I wouldn't let down this presentation because I've been giving a lot of presentations previously as well. So I would really do a good job. These are the thoughts that I, after practicing CBT, have been trying to rationalize every time I come up with an automatic negative thought. What happens with this automatic negative thought is they create an illusion, which might seem like reality, which might seem like true. When immediately after I walk out of an interview panel and I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a failure, I couldn't answer that one question, it will create a illusion of reality because you just have come out of that situation and you know that you didn't answer, which is a true thing. But is it true? No. When you write them down, you also know that this is the only time you missed one question. It's not always. And when you weigh down whether it's real or not real, most of the times with experience, my clients and I myself have weighed down. We've seen that how unrealistic our thoughts are. Even in our day-to-day life, in the spur of the moment, we would have thought, I've lost it. You know what, I should really think about something else, or I'm a total failure. I can't do anything anymore. But after, as and when the time passes, when we get back this thought, that once upon a time, I actually thought I'm a failure and I'm a loser, we will laugh at it. We'll be like, I've never thought I could think of so many things. So there's also a disclaimer that I would say negative feelings are healthy. After telling all of this, there might come a question: why are you so persistently telling do not feel negative, do not be sad, do not be frustrated? No, I'm not telling all of that. I'm just telling that persistently having a negative feeling is not good for us. Today, after a long time, like if we have not treated ourselves or if we have not corrected our thoughts, after a long time, or probably 6 to 7 months down the line, we will end up inside a clinic, or we will end up in a place where we will not be able to recover ourselves from there. It is always better to start early. To be sad, depressed, it's universal. It doesn't mean that a person is sick or neurotic. Almost everyone feels this way. I do feel that way sometimes. My main goal was to show how to deal with these feelings more effectively. I also wanted to encourage you to accept your feelings, because until and unless you accept it, there will be this paradox of unacceptance and acceptance. When you don't accept, the frustration increases. When you don't accept that you're angry, your anger increases. When you don't accept that you're feeling sad, the sadness increases. With you not accepting, you're not going to be able to deal with it effectively and eradicate it totally. Only when you accept that, yes, I am sad, so let me work with it. What am I sad for? How do I go about treating myself? How do I go about changing my thoughts? And that's how CBT works. That's how accepting paradox works. But then if you still think that there are some rigorous thoughts that keeps coming every now and then, and you're not able to work with yourself, and sometimes this is leading to extreme thoughts and extreme thought provocation, then I would suggest you all to meet a clinical psychologist. There are a number of books. You can probably go through those books as well before you see a psychologist. Now that we've come here, I've given you bits and pieces of all the information that I wanted to give you all today. I need to have a thread to connect them all as well, right? So why is it important? Why am I talking about it today? I'm talking about it today because I feel nothing happens overnight. I have inculcated distorted cognition not overnight. From when I was a child, probably someone has been telling me or been cueing me that you're a failure, you don't look good, or you wouldn't do anything good in your life. It didn't happen overnight. When it didn't happen overnight, I'm sure it's not going to go away overnight. Once we fall sick, once we are low, once we are sad, If I come up to a clinician and say, you know what, let me change my thought, I'm motivated now to live a good life, to live a happy life. No, it's not going to happen. With the rising influence around us, with the rising if and buts, with the rising understanding of how to be happy, so much of peer pressure, I think we should start it right away. They are happy. Probably that's his way of happiness. Probably going to Maldives was gives him happiness. But for me, that's not what happiness is. For me, going to a pub or going clubbing is not happiness. Sitting down in my own room reading a book is happiness. So such things we need to start reflecting. We easily do come under the pressure, peer pressure that's going around. That's because of a lot of influences around. But then if we start it even today, if we start to, you know, be self-aware about our thoughts even today, this minute, if we start making the change, it'll do a much bigger and greater work. And it is, I also think that it is important in one another way. These days we are getting children for counseling. We are getting children who are anxious all the time, who are nervous, who go pale when they have to go to school. When you go and reason for it, most of the time it's not about the child. The child is definitely not born with a thought distortion or some faulty thinking. The child has developed to think in a certain way because mother or father is been thinking in that pattern, or mother or father has imposed it on the child. A child is not born fearing cockroaches or fearing darkness. The child has learned it. So only if we stabilize ourselves will we be able to, you know, nurture the environment. We'll be able to nurture or set up a good family environment for the next generation to come. So it is quite important for us, for the change to begin within us, the change in understanding the faulty thinking and reiterating it for us. And as a longer vision, if we start stabilizing our emotions and thoughts right from now, there are higher chances our emotional intelligence can also come to a particular level. And that goes to the end of our presentation. I would like to conclude in a small nutshell, telling thoughts are the one which we think. Thoughts, what we think affects how we feel and act, and behavior is what we do affects and how we think and feel, and emotions are what we feel, which affects how we think and act. It's like a vicious cycle. Whether it's a vicious cycle or a good cycle, again, depends on us. I've given you the key that thoughts is everything. So place your scale on thoughts, be aware of your thoughts, and then try working on yourselves. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. You talked about negative thoughts, but I would like to say it was a very positive presentation.
Thank you, Niharika.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm very glad to hear a lecture from you. So now we would like to take questions. I think one is already in store for you. Vijay Lakshmi K wants to ask, hi madam, is there any software tool to test cognitive behavior grade of it?
I don't think there is any software for us to test cognitive behavioral grade. I mean, it is about yourself. Until and unless you write it down, until and unless you are, how open you are might rate. There is no app, but there are a lot of apps these days online. I have not tried any of those. Probably if I come across anything, then I'll keep you informed.
Yeah, thanks for your answer, madam. Can we develop some app for it? Is there any scope for developing an app for it? You told yes, by our thoughts, we can definitely change our feelings and our behavior. As such, so how can myself test that, yes, I'm improving myself? Is there any model is there? Can we build a model for this? As you say,
There's already a model available.
Yeah.
All what we do is we maintain a journal. That is, you'll have a daily diary. You'll write down. Suppose today was the interview and I failed the interview. I might write today I'm angry, 9, and I'm sad, 8. After 10 days, I might reevaluate it and rate my emotions again. That's how we've been doing all this while. There are apps and there is scope for app improvement, but how far is it going to be reliable and valid is again a big question. It's something in the future. Most of us are working on it all as well. So
okay, yeah. Okay. Can we ask, because I am a biomedical engineer, is there scope for my student, as I am a professor talking to BMS College of Engineering, is there any scope for developing an app for our students in your institution? It's there. Definitely we would like to contribute something towards this for developing an app.
Ma'am, can we just take the questions for now
Yes.
and all
Yeah.
such things we do it later on
Ma'am,
the-
I'll share Priyanka's
Okay.
email ID with you. You can get in touch personally with her.
Yes,
And
definitely.
because
Definitely.
we are a little short of time and there are many questions. There's
Yes.
a question by Aishwarya Priyanka. Can you suggest any good books for reference? Can you name a few of them?
Okay, I vouch by CBT by Aaron Beck and Feeling Good by Dr. Burns, Richard Burns, if I'm not wrong. These are the two books I vouch by. Like, that's something that I would give my clients and friends also to read. I can share the books in the group.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Then
Niharika, if you can give me permission to just have a few comments over here. First
okay.
of all,
So we can't
fantastic
see you.
presentation by Priyanka.
So
Uh,
okay, we can't
no,
see
if you
you,
give
sir.
permission. Okay, fine.
Oh,
Perfect.
okay. Actually,
No, because somebody asked about the tool available. So there is a tool called Prism Brain Mapping, and you can try it out. It's an excellent one, and it's about somebody's behavioral preferences can be easily found out, and it's a nice one. You can try it out.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. We'll just read out some of the questions in the chat box, and anyone who has a question, they can raise their hands in the chat box itself, or like when your name shows, so I'll be able to unmute you. So otherwise it'll be a little chaotic if everyone starts speaking and I'm also reading questions and Priyanka is also answering at the same time. Priyanka, there's another question for you. What are the components of well-being? Can we quantify well-being?
Okay,
What
as
are the
per WHO, there are few components of well-being. Social well-being, psychological well-being are one of those. We can't quantify well-being, sir. It's quite personal. What is well-being to me probably may not be well-being to you. In general, all we need is healthy mind, healthy body, and healthy soul to some extent, and a good environment which can nurture us. Quantification of well-being, there are few scales where we can quantify, but then do we really need to quantify well-being?
Yes. Sameer Mishra has the next question. I congratulate Priyanka for this PPT. Today we require something like this in such pandemic situations. My question is, what should we write when depressed? How to deal with stress?
Thank you, Sameer.
Is Sameer here? Like, can we also see Sameer? Okay, he's here. So would you like to answer the question yourself? Do you want to like talk about the question more, or is
Thanks,
that enough?
Niharika, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
That was a really very interesting presentation, and that was the need of the time also. As you see what is going on in the society, people are in stress either from whatever stream they are, either the industries people are in stress. So what can we talk about the people who are not having the livelihood? Even the people are like from the researchers, not to talk about world, even I'm talking about myself. I am the one who has given the interview just now. And I'm really that how to deal with the stress. I was thanked that Priyanka and such type of people from cognitive CBT, and I'm surrounded by such people that I couldn't step any harsh thing. But I'm really sad that in the whole world, like people would be dealing with such kind of stress, like not taking out interview, not cracking any exam. Like Priyanka type of student would not be with them side to side to help them. So how will they manage this stress, Priyanka? Can you please help those rural people? They are not having a livelihood today. How they will do it?
Actually, we are lucky to be born in Indian culture because we have all of this already in our Indian psychology. To be mindful is something that it's been taught to us right from the beginning. I don't know how many of you know this, but then at least at my place, my parents insist me not to talk bad things to myself or about me because they say God is always there on top. I mean, the God goes on procession and he might say Tatastu when you say bad things. So all such smaller nuances, no, we've lost it in our day-to-day life. That's why we had to get something like CBT to us. For such students, I would always say that we need to pass it on. That's all is one way. Like I've taught you teach a few people that this emotion that you are undergoing is like quite it's temporary. It's not real. You can probably alter your thought. That's not how you think. So it's going to be word to word, or we're just going to pass it on like that until it reaches everyone.
Thanks a lot, Priyanka. Thanks again.
Okay, the next question is by Biju Thomas. Madam, nice lecture. I learned that there are 3 types of core beliefs like worthlessness, helplessness, and lovelessness. Would you please brief on it?
All the 3 belong to depression. Those like core beliefs people with depression carry around with them. To feel worthlessness is to say that, I'm not worthy of anything. Irrespective of, even if the person gets an award, he might walk down the stage and go backstage and say, you know what, I'm not worthy of it. They simply gave me because they thought if they don't give me this, I might feel bad. Helplessness is even in a situation where I know I can come out of it, I can strive or I can work harder and come out of it, I might still say that, no, I do not have a solution. Probably I'm not the right person whom, you can ask for the solution. Lovelessness is, again, all these 3 are quite unrealistic. In spite of them getting in evidence that this is not real, they are still going to believe with all these 3 because they are patients who are depressed. That means for a longer period of time, from their childhood, they've been believing this. For us to change this in them will take quite some time, at least say about 6 months or something. The time that I'm giving you is like just to explain how long it might take. It is different for different people.
Dr. Saurabh Todaria has a question. Thanks, Priyanka. What is the role of narratives in mental health?
It plays a quite important role, sir. I think narrative is, the thoughts and narrative are almost the same. The dialogues that we speak to ourselves is very important. I think, okay, until our generation it's done, at least from the coming generation, we need to teach them what to talk, how to talk, and when to tell. That becomes quite important. Like I said, because your thoughts are the ones which is playing the major role in how the person feels and how they're going to behave. So narratives in mental health is very important.
Okay. There's a question by Dr. R. Krishnan Bhatt. Why do we stress as negative always? It's not so. Please comment.
I didn't understand the question. I'm sorry.
I'll read it again. Why do we stress as negative always? It's not so. Dr. R. Krishnan, sir, are you here? Can we see your video so you can ask the question yourself? So is it possible for you to switch on your video? I don't think. Okay.
Can we take the next question by Dia? And then
Yes. Okay. The next question is by Priya. Hi, ma'am. Thanks for this brief into CBT. This sounds quite apt as self-help method. And but her question is, at what point should one consider a therapist? What is the role of therapist according to you?
Well, that's quite interesting. Okay, at what point should one consider a therapist? When the mood is long-standing and you're not able to perform in your day-to-day life, your occupational life is not going as per how it's supposed to go. Personal life is gone haywire. You're not eating well, sleeping well. There are other symptoms because of which because of mood which is taking a hit. That's the time I think we all need to walk into the clinic. And what's the role of therapist? Until and unless we are motivated to change, I don't think any therapist can do any wonder. When I'm motivated, because it's a collaborative experience. I have experience of CBT, you have experience of your own self. Only when you come in and are willing to share your experience with me, will I be able to help you. So the role of therapist is very minimal. Until and unless the client is ready to talk about his or own experience, I don't think anything can be done. For that, we need to be aware.
Okay. I think we can take one last question before I invite Meera back again. I think Dr. R. Krishnan meant we say stress in a way, we take stress in a very negative way, like as if stress is always negative. So I think he means to us that is it so all the time?
Definitely not. That's why I said in disclaimer that stress is not always bad. Stress is good. Otherwise, we would be standing where we are. Until and unless there is some kind of uncomfortable feeling that arises or erupts within, we are not going to grow or improve. Negative feeling is good, but how much of negative feeling and what kind of negative feeling is a question. Though I was asked to give a lecture and I felt a little uncomfortable telling, no, I don't want to switch on video. No, I don't want to give a lecture. We still do it because that uncomfortable is going to help you grow. Rightly said by someone here, eustress and distress. Eustress is something that is good for us. Distress, that is feeling strained and drained, is not good for us. So negative feeling of distress is not good for us.
Yeah, okay. So as we'll take more questions, you can write to us even in the WhatsApp group, or you can email Priyanka. I'll share her email ID with her permission on the group. Now I would like to call the chairperson of today's lecture, Meera Kumar Menon, a PhD scholar with our team. Meera, we would appreciate some comments from you.
It's raining heavily here. I hope you guys can hear me. You can?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Great. So thank you, Priyanka, for that very fruitful, let me say, because you connected all these academic jargon in a very, very palatable fashion for all of us. It was immediately fruitful. So thank you for that. And I was thinking very recently in Kerala, a couple of children suicided because, right after during their exams, right after their exams and so forth. And this is something that we keep seeing across years. So very recently after the exam results came out, the chief minister made a comment that the students of this particular year are generation hope, because they managed to write the exams, and whether they failed or not, whether they passed or failed, irrespective of that, they made it through the pandemic. So I'm sure there are so many people who might have come to you, especially during these times, for help and so forth. And I'm assuming that CBT must have helped in one way or another. So all of you guys, like psychologists who are like extending your provisions for all of us, I congratulate you on behalf of all of us, especially all the new initiatives that we have been seeing around call us, talk to us and all of that. It's really laudable. Apart from that, I was just wondering, quite like what Saurabh sir was saying, how is this exactly different from, say, logotherapy? Because this is also based on narratives and what you tell yourself and how the therapist talks to the person. So it's basically a talk-based therapy, right?
It is a talk-based therapy, but it has a structure. There is a particular structure and a particular way through which we talk to patients. And it's not that when they walk into the clinic, I'm going to ask about what triggered, what is maintaining. I'm not going to ask. I'm just going to ask how are they feeling and why are they feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is when someone walks into the clinic, there is this one thing that when I walk out, I need to feel better. There is no one who's going to wait until 1 month or 2 months to understand themselves in deep and then sort the problem. No one is wanting to know what sparked the fire. All they want to do is put down the air so that the fire reduces.
Okay. So I was hoping that if you could also tell for what specific disorders or like psychological problems are CBT most helpful, that might help.
Usually we use it on depressed, OCD, personality disorders, any kind of marital counseling. For clinical factors, except schizophrenia, rest all of it fits in. Even for ADHD, autism, when we know that there's certain thing that we can help the parents by giving such CBT, then I think we go ahead and use it. Except for schizophrenia, rest all of it will sometimes be paired up with drug therapy, or most of the time we tend to give only CBT. In Western countries, this is something that is highly used, and we have now variations of CBT also: mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, rationalization-based cognitive therapy. So yeah. But for normal population, I think we need to use it. This is like a Pandora box which I found, and I'm like, let's all use it. It's quite important for all of us.
So you spoke about certain distortions also in thinking patterns. I think it would be very useful if somebody kind of teaches you how to think, especially when you are in your high school or say in your graduation level, because thought distortions can be very negative and unhelpful in many ways. So that you threw light on it, and I'm very grateful for that. So that'll be all. It was a very wonderful lecture. Now I'll invite Niharika to give the vote of thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much, Priyanka.
Thank you.
Priyanka has been working with Team CSP for I think 2 years now, or 1 year.
1 year, 2 months.
So it's always a pleasure talking about psychology with her. Long discussions. So I thank Priyanka. And on behalf of Team CSP, we thank each and every participants in today's lecture. And for any further questions that you have, you can contact us through our website and also through our email address. And we have a WhatsApp group running for particularly for Friday lectures. You can contact us there also. Me and Meera Kumar Menon are actually the coordinators of this group. You can write personally to us also. You can find our contacts on the website. For the upcoming Friday lecture, that is on Ayurveda. It is a very intriguing topic. The topic is lectures learned from traditional Indian health systems, a case study on Ayurveda. We'll have an Ayurvedic doctor with us, Dr. Pushya A. Gautam, who will be delivering the lecture, and she'll talk about life and how to balance and what are the tricks and ways in Ayurveda for us. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you all via online platform, and thank you for joining with us today. Thank you. Thank you, Priyanka, once more. Thank you, Meera.